welcome to yet another episode of Rock the Boat 868, the podcast. So I know you probably thought we went rogue and abandoned you because it's been a few weeks. It's been a minute.
Yeah, I think it's 4 weeks in total now.
God, you didn't have to say it like that. You could have just said it was a minute, you know? But it's been a minute. Okay, so a couple of things happened. What had happened was, one, I think it's important for us as creatives to understand that we need to take a minute sometimes. We need self-care, we need to process. And 2020 has been a lot. So in the midst of the election brouhaha, we did take a moment. But then we did in fact record a pre-election episode. It was hard-hitting, as well as a lot of fun. We played a game where we 5 words or less was the game.
Yes.
We dealt with things like the dome, black versus black man, sketchy advertising.
Black is King from
Yeah.
Beyonce.
Mm-hmm.
Giselle Knowles Carter.
First of her name. We dealt with quite a few things. A lot of the shenanigans as it's pertained to the election campaign and whatnot. Unfortunately, we experienced some technical issues as it pertained to that episode, and thus, henceforth, that episode will now be referred to as the Lost Files.
So it is written, so it is done.
The
The
Lost
Lost Files.
Never to be recovered. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. We decided that we didn't want to revisit per se what we would have dealt with in episode 3 because it definitely had that pre-election tone and mood, and we wanted to come back post-election with a new kind of energy, but not new, a different, maybe lighter
Yes.
energy, so to speak.
So the issues have remained, but certainly perspectives have changed because we know exactly how we're moving forward right now. We know who the incumbent government is.
Yeah.
We know who the opposition
Recounts
is.
notwithstanding. Recount gates. It was a mood, you know, recount gates.
Yeah.
You know, we count and we count and we count, and people who wanted the count end up with less votes than they had when the count started. It was a glorious time. It's a glorious time.
It was a glorious time, a time that caused us to reflect on the electoral system, the veracity of the Elections and Boundaries Commission.
Tribal politics, you know, the underbelly of racism in Trinidad and Tobago that we pretend doesn't happen except during election time.
And forced us to ask important questions about the integrity of journalism in Trinidad and Tobago.
Ooh, sis, preach. How you coping?
I coping, you know. I good. You see which part I am right here? I coping just fine. I don't know about other people, but I good.
That said, which seems to be, you know, a new hashtag. I told him he needs to trademark it, he needs to merchandise it. We're going to be chatting today. You're hearing him laughing in the background. We're going to be chatting today, Lyman today, with Facebook Maverick, I want to call him. Young Facebook Maverick.
Celebrity.
Comedian, spoken word artist, but also very important, an artist who has a mind for activism and social commentary, which I think is really important in this now time of the reckoning. I'm talking about Kwame Weeks. He's here with us. We're going to ask him how he coping when we come back and some other things. For those of you who don't know him, we're hoping that in the next 20 minutes or so, you get the opportunity to get to know him. So we're going to come back, we're going to talk, and we're going to get it out. We system.
I used to be a journalist, and as a journalist, sometimes I would have to cover court. Now, if it was never inside a magistrate's court, it have a big metal cage that they used to hold mostly dark-skinned East Indian and dark-skinned African people, most of whom they arrested for the possession or the smoking of marijuana. And that used to get me real vexed, because why is it that you as a bigger, hard-back, dark-skinned man still smoking weed without the company of your white friends? That's just being irresponsible. You're supposed to know by now that if you want to engage in some minor illegal activities, it's best to do so under the cover of some Westmoreland white girls. And it's not enough to just have them in your presence. You need to get the ratio right, because it have a delicate balance. You had to strike for it to work. For example, 2 white men and 1 black man speeding up the highway is just 2 men late for a meeting being driven by their driver. whatever. 2 black men and 1 white man is a kidnapping. Get right.
Get it right, Amanda.
Yeah.
Get it right. There are certain unspoken laws that, you know, it would be remiss of you not to follow. It's unfortunate, you know. And the thing is, it's a good thing we could laugh at these things. Because, I mean, we saw what happened in TNT after the elections in terms of everybody. As usual, you know, I always say it's nobody don't call you, but the racists always find a way to show up in Washington on Summoned and showing their whole ass all over Mark Zuckerberg's social media.
Yes.
You know, and then we've also seen what continues to happen in the United States. I mean, as of right now, today's what, August 25th?
Yes, it is.
25th or 26th?
25th.
25th. Over the weekend, this weekend gone here, we had a black man shot 7 times in the back in the United States. You know what I mean? In his effort to break up a fight, United States white policeman thought that the way to arrest that situation, pun intended, was to shoot an unarmed black man 7 times in his back in front of his children. Protests have erupted again all over the United States, which it never really stopped, but it has erupted again in a big way. So it's good that we have people who have a level of social conscience that can craft things in a certain way that can make us laugh, because if you don't laugh, you cry. But it's also a harsh reminder of the circumstances and the condition of living in black personhood and experiencing black humanity.
Yes.
The world over right about now.
One of the most ironic things for me with the last election period was that immediately after, not even more than a week, I think, was the anniversary of the 2012 state of emergency in Trinidad and Tobago, which was the first time terms such as hotspots were used when 6
and
districts,
people that look like
exactly
what it was, people
Sandy.
that look like Sandy.
right.
Remember that?
And 6 districts in particular were targeted within the state of emergency, and these districts remain targeted by the police in Trinidad and Tobago along the lines of race and class.
But Gary Griffith is on TikTok though, so I mean, Trinidad is safe. Trinidad is safe. Anyway, I digress. I'm sorry, I came back after elections, particularly petty, and I don't know why. Kwame, it's so great to have you in the mix. We've all looked at and admired your work over the last 2 years or so. So I thought it would be really cool to hang out with you this afternoon inside of our Get It Out Your System segment and give people a chance to get to know who is Kwame Weeks, who is the fella behind the railing and the gate and the curtain and all the other strange places that you stand up to perform and post on social media. Who is Kwame Weeks?
Jeez, I hope that in like 10 years I'll be able to answer that question with some clarity. I always feel like I'm in a job interview and somebody asks me, who are you? And I get kind of nervous because I'm not really sure. My current incarnation is a comedian. I do stuff on the internet and I perform on stage before BC, in the BC era, before COVID.
Yes.
Yeah, missing it daily. Hopefully it come back by 2025.
Yeah. Let's be realistic. That's pretty much what it's going to be.
But yeah, I'm a comedian and I'm also a teacher. I teach history and social studies.
Of course you do. It makes so much sense.
A lot of sense.
Wow.
History and social
Yeah.
studies.
It makes sense. What age group primarily?
Secondary school. So Form 2 to Form 5.
Wow.
I teach.
You see, this warms my heart because as much as we're in a place where we need reform within the education system, we've been assured by Keith Christopher that we are going to reform the curriculum. We have 2 women who've been placed in charge of the Ministry of Education, and we've been assured that their womanhood somehow,
Yeah, as mothers.
as mothers, will save the education system.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
forget their qualifications.
I'm glad you make this point, Abeo.
PhD in
I'm
chemistry.
glad you make this point.
Mayor Verima for how many years,
Yeah.
but their womanhood is going to save the education system.
You know, in 2010, when Kamala Persad Bissessar became the first woman Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, not just that, but also first woman prime minister of any country outside of India or the South Asian countries, persons made the same assertion that her womanhood was somehow an assurance of good governance. But look at where we are. Look at where we are in 2020.
Sunlight will kill COVID.
Sunlight will kill COVID.
Erased Margaret Thatcher from our memories.
I mean, Maggie was a little problematic.
Exactly.
So Kwame, we're talking about you as an artist and as a performer. So we see what you do on Facebook, we see what you do on social media in general, and there are some people who probably think that it's easy, and I know for a fact that it is not. To perform, and particularly the form and the medium that you've chosen, it's not an easy thing to do. So what is your performance background? How long have you been doing this, and how did you evolve to the point of what you're doing now?
Jeez. I guess my performance started in church as people always shock when I say this, but I used to be a big Christian, big Catholic in particular. I've since moved on. But
checking to see if Amanda has burst into flames. But she hasn't.
Yeah. She's happy about the moving on part, I'm sure.
Yes, listen to me. My eyebrow raiser, but I'm calm now.
We are not casting aspersions at any of our Catholic listeners. We love you a whole lot. Praise God. Hallelujah. Okay? Yes. Carry on.
But the same notoriety, I guess, that I have now, I had when I was a Catholic. I was going to be a priest and all of that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I used to preach as a youth in secondary school. I used to lead assembly, and so I got a lot of practice in public speaking from a very young age because of my faith. Yeah. And then I moved from there to spoken word poetry. Some people find that the way I naturally talk is like if I was performing a spoken word one. I don't hear it, but people tell me that. And then from spoken word I went into acting, a bit carry comedy, not professionally, just me wanting to do it, and did it, and people like it. And then I started stand up like 2 years ago, and that's where I am right now.
They say stand up. One of my past mentors, now gone, now taken from us, Raymond Chugon, he would always, and I've seen him do it.
Right.
But he would always say stand-up comedy is one of the hardest forms. It's different from comedic theater. It's totally different. And it is one of the most difficult things to do. You have to be very vulnerable, very open.
Yeah. It's the hardest thing I ever did. Preaching and spoken word had a kind of, you could hide in those art forms, in the sense that the effect you're trying to get in your audience as a preacher or as a spoken word artist is diverse. Like your poem, some parts might have laughter, some parts you want people to think, where people go ooh, ah. But with comedy is laughter. It's like one thing you're looking for, so it's very obvious when you feel that. It's very obvious. Like a spoken word artist, you can say, people still snap their fingers and say good poem, but as a comedian, if you feel, everybody know you feel, and you know you feel mostly. If nobody laugh, and that is part of the process, so it's very difficult for sure.
So having had the experience in terms of, and my mind is still blown in terms of the dude who at one point wanted to be a priest to the guy who is savaging people on social media for good reason. Why comedy? Like, why? What about that particular form is attractive to you?
I guess I've always been kind of opinionated. Always been a person observing myself and the things around me, and I guess I gravitated towards art forms that allow me to express it. And I felt that spoken word wasn't given me the full range that I wanted in terms of my ability to express myself. I've since changed my mind on that, but at the time I thought so. And I was listening to a lot of stand-up comedy, the Louis C.K.'s, the Dave Chappelle's, everybody, and I say, these people saying so many things that I want to say, and they have the attitude towards it that I like too. That you can talk about dark things or serious things in a jovial way.
Right.
And I say, yeah, let me try it, and I try it, and I bust for like 5 months. And
no, busting important. Busting important.
Yeah. But I stick to it, and I guess I find my space.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up Dave Chappelle. You saw the last, I mean, I sent it to you, Amanda, that last oh gosh, what is it called? The last piece that he did, which was like a piece on the George Floyd experience.
Yes.
The name of it was The Time.
Was the time that the guy's knee was in his
something.
neck. Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody was hyped when he previewed it because you're thinking Dave Chappelle, it's going to be funny, etc.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that there weren't comedic moments, but he established himself as not just and he has long since done it, but I think that one cemented in this now time that he's not just a comedian, or maybe it's less about not just being a comedian, but that to be a comedian, one must have a certain level of social conscience and responsibility and be able to comment on what is going on around us in a way that goes past the gigi. The gigi is fine.
Yeah.
The gigi is fine.
And that is something I note with you as well, Kwame, because even though the work is obviously hilarious, there's also a deep reflection on race relations, a deep reflection on class struggles. So when you said just now that your present circumstance is further to the work, the public work, you're also a teacher of history and a teacher of social studies, it made me wonder on exactly which material is your focus in terms of your occupation.
Well, with secondary school is a general history, is teach Caribbean history mostly.
Caribbean history.
Yeah, well, I do teach up to Form 5. The syllabus they are a little broader. You learn about America and the UK, etc. But I teach social studies up to Form 5, and that is pretty surprisingly very broad. Like now, like because of the elections, one of the things I hear people say a lot is we need to teach these things in school, but we do teach it in school. It's in the social studies syllabus, how the electoral process works, etc. But people just don't care. It's not compulsory to. Not everybody does social studies, and those that do, unfortunately, and I hate saying this, but the people that end up doing social studies, people treat social studies as a throwaway subject.
Yes, they put it there when you can't do
science and things, you know. And the attitude that reflected from admin to social is reflected in the students, so they kind of don't care about it at times too. Yeah.
And this is also a commentary on, again, those colonial legacies that are still very resonant within our education system. That classism, that elitism. If you're not doing sciences, then you are unworthy. You're not bright enough. And then there are certain schools that don't offer social studies because they don't see it as a prestigious subject. You know what I mean?
But I teach in a prestige school. I teach in Presando. That's a prestige school.
Yes, I remember.
Alma mater. They introduced social studies. I don't think I should be saying this, but it was a recent introduction from my understanding. And it was definitely because we started bringing in people to play football.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
I hate saying
that.
That's terrible. And this is a subject that really should be compulsory. And this last election, post-election period, showed us that with a debate online about the popular vote. And the popular vote, that question of the popular vote really undermining the electoral system.
Right. And also it not being true. Like as in the UNC said it was day one.
And then it turns out that it's not true.
Recount dates. We remember. Never forget. The thing is, it's interesting that all of these things come up in the midst of how we treat with certain things, and we. Dr. Rowley did say he wanted to see the reintroduction of civics, which ties in well, I guess, with social studies across the board in schools. And I think it's going to be interesting, but we also going to have to decide what we want to include on that civics curriculum, so to speak, because it doesn't make sense supposedly reformatting the education system and including new things if we're still going to frame it in the same framework, that post-colonial framework that tries to ignore certain things. If it come like spinning top in mud, it doesn't make sense trying to include these things if we're not willing to have certain uncomfortable conversations within the classroom setting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we have to trust that our young people are much more capable
And
than we
they
give
are.
them credit for.
That is one thing I learned. I only started last year.
Right.
And definitely people underestimate young people and what they're willing to talk about.
What they're willing to
like
talk
they're
about.
really interested in the conversation. They just gotta be willing to,
That's right.
to facilitate it.
We need to make sure that the people who are going to be in charge of the framing of this new way forward, supposedly in the education system, that they aren't the type who would want to shy away from certain things because they feel as though it is inappropriate for the classroom.
Yeah.
This bullshit year that has been 2020 has truly underlined the fact that we have gotten to the point where we have to stop this nonsense about what's appropriate and what is inappropriate in terms of conversation as it pertains to race and class and ethnicity.
Yeah.
Because we have people out here who are providing meals on the school feeding program whose bosses, whose employees carry the same name as the supposed company.
Yeah.
Talking about putting contraceptives in drinks and
Yeah.
food for people of our entire ethnicity and
Yeah,
race.
seeing
That is our
really
problem.
on Facebook.
You understand what I mean? And instead of talking about what was said and holding them accountable, the conversation descended into something that was so much more infantile as to should the company be held accountable? Should companies be held accountable for the individual actions of an employee?
Yeah.
Which to me belittled what we should have really been talking about. Yes, accountability, absolutely, that's part of it. But the fact that we have people who feel comfortable saying these things in public domain, knowing that we don't have a culture in Trinidad and Tobago that would take it seriously enough.
Yeah.
Let's get to the root of that and why people feel okay saying these kinds of things.
Right.
Exactly. There was one person on social media who also gave a very revisionist perspective of Caribbean history. So I'm glad that you're here to talk about this, Kwame, because she spoke about the factors that gave way for indentureship in Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh yes, I saw that.
And this was so interesting to me because the antagonism that we still deal with between different demographics here, particularly racial demographics here, are contingent upon historical facts related to the enslavement of African heritage people and their transposition into Caribbean spaces, and also the indentureship of not just persons of Indian heritage, but persons of Madeira and Chinese, even persons from Africa as well, came into Trinidad and Tobago during the time of indentureship. So when this young woman was giving this version of history in which, black people were just lazy, they didn't want the money, and we came here and we saved this country, we built up this country. I mean, it was interesting because not only are the facts concerning that period available to anyone who wants the information, but certainly this is supposed to be part of our curriculum.
It makes you question.
But what it made me do though is that I made the decision to start researching more because I did history in UWI.
Right.
And I realized now that I don't know much about indentureship, strangely enough. We definitely studied slavery a lot, but I feel ignorant of not just indentureship, but of East Indian intellectual writing in Trinidad.
Ah, gotcha.
And I realized lately that there's a whole branch of people who have their opinions and
subscribe to different views. But
and they seem so foreign from what I have come to understand. I want to read it to get more understanding. Yeah.
My thing is I don't have an issue with people subscribing to different schools of thought and ideology, but to me all schools of thought and ideology should be rooted in facts.
For sure.
And without prejudice.
Yeah, and without prejudice. And there are certain facts as it pertains to post-colonial legacy. Well, the colonial experience, back it up, the slavery experience, the colonial experience, post-colonial experience, and all that which would have come from that. How we treat with policing in Trinidad and Tobago, what circumstances would have allowed for marginalization of certain communities to happen. There are certain facts
objective
You
facts
understand that
cannot be
allow
disputed.
those things to exist that really can't be disputed, but there's a level of gaslighting going on in Trinidad today. People are literally peeing in your face and telling you it's rain, and I realize that it's one of those things where the gaslighting level has gone to the point where people say things so often that they actually have a following now, people who believe them,
Right.
who see it as truth.
Yeah.
You know, the Raymond Run Charitas of the world and whatnot.
Well, one thing that Kamala Persad-Bissessar said on an election platform that continues to bother me was her comparison of citizens of Trinidad who are abroad presently due to the public health ordinance that has
worse
left
than
the borders
Yeah,
closed.
worse than slavery,
A
no.
comparison of that few months to 400 years of enslavement.
Of enslavement.
And she
Right?
tried the
And then she
indentureship,
throws in indentureship.
So just, you know, to kind of take the edge off. It's like when I put LOL at the end of a comment, you know?
I'm glad that she did it for balance. For balance.
Yeah.
Because then she further, in addition to 400 years of enslavement, she adds years and years of terrible working conditions to that.
Yeah.
So, and not just terrible working conditions, but Indian indentureship in Trinidad and Tobago. I shouldn't say Indian indentureship, I should just say the period of indentureship in Trinidad and Tobago also supported marginalization, socio-political marginalization of people who came here at that time.
Yeah.
So that's why I said, you know what, I'm glad that she chose an indentureship there, because it could be easy for this to look like, oh, black people just quarreling, black people just against Kamala. No. Kamala Persad-Bissessar seemed in the pre-election month to be depending on an uninformed electorate.
That's right.
So since we're having a conversation now about a reform of education or a privileging of certain subjects within the education system, subjects such as history, subjects such as social studies, or a reintroduction of civics, we need to give that conversation very serious consideration, because you see what happened there in that July to August month in Trinidad and Tobago, that tells us that there's a lot of information missing, which is why somebody could come on a national platform and talk about black man and then change it to blank man.
And expect us to take it like cake.
Exactly.
You understand? We spoke about it in the Lost Files, blank versus blank, and black versus blank, and feeling as though joke is joke, but damn joke ain't no fun. You understand what I mean? To me, blank man wasn't a punchline. I couldn't rationalize blank man as a punchline. There was something about it that was, for me, was very irksome, offensive, hurtful. I just felt like it was a slap in the face of my ancestors.
Am I disappointed there?
I know. Listen, and this is the thing where I say I could understand different perspectives. You understand what I mean? For me, it wasn't funny to me. I understand that as a comedian, that was like easy fodder, so to speak.
It wasn't funny. It was more again, going back to what I said off air, that I'm a Sophie.
Yes.
And I'm always willing to understand. And so when the clip had originally come out, I get dragged onto that. And I still kind of parody there, because I always said, I heard blank. And I kept trying to tell people, no, she said blank. And people were saying, even if she said blank,
it's still a problem.
What's the word? Is a dog whistle.
Yes, it
and,
is.
I was like, oh yeah, sure, boy, I don't know. But then it became clearer and clearer afterwards.
Yes,
I took my tail between my legs. Yeah?
But dog whistling aside, even if it wasn't intended as a dog whistle, even if no one received it as a dog whistle, to refer to a person as blank is erasure. That reduces personhood, it reduces humanity, and is ultimately worse than if you said black. Black is what I am and what you are and we are. We
black is an actual identity.
Politically, as it is used on racist platforms, that is the context within which it was being examined in Kamala's speech, as it is used on racist platforms. But then when the lady comes afterwards and says that she in fact said blank, then she sort of pigeonholes herself, because that is a worse infraction.
Yeah.
In my book.
Okay.
Yeah. See?
All right.
You see, remember what I told you? Every 2 days we say we did not come in and heavy down the
You
thing,
get
and then
heavy.
we just heavy down the thing. Anyway, so it's great that we've had this conversation because I wanted to ask you, you know, how have people received your kind of hybrid of comedy as well as your social media presence that also has this very clear social conscience attached to it? Like, how have people received that from you?
People receiving it well, surprisingly. It's kind of accidental how this whole thing unfolded. My intentions when I started last September, so it's a year coming up on my anniversary, was to introduce myself to Trinidad because I was doing comedy for 2 years before that, stand-up, and it wasn't being reflected in my numbers, you know, which apparently matters as an entertainer now. So I say, you know what, let me try to do something online, but using my own face, because I was always behind other brands before with Little Clock and then Carry Comedy. And
Right.
so yeah, and I say I would do it until December last year, and I see where it goes, and it kind of went crazy.
I think it was well timed. I mean, we didn't realize the world was about to fall apart thanks to COVID.
Jeez, yeah.
And I think people who have platforms like yours,
Yeah.
other comedians, other artists who had that kind of social media presence with their faces attached, faces and voices attached before, y'all got in, y'all be the iron while it was hot, y'all.
Yeah.
Because that's where it's heading to now generally in terms of artists.
Yeah.
You know, live audience is about to be almost a thing. Well, I don't want to say a thing of the past because we rebuked that, but we may not get back to live audiences, like you said, until like what, 2025-ish?
Yeah, at least not in the way they used to be.
Yeah.
Because like some places in the UK and thing have a Bayesian comedian friend over there and they start back comedy clubs.
Yeah, but
And-
the UK and American folks are kind of crazy.
They kind of weird,
Yeah,
yeah.
thanks to COVID, they are out there without masks.
Yeah.
And I know.
I foresee like venue changes because before this latest lockdown, Movie Town was planning a stand-up comedy show.
Right.
And they were going to do the same social distancing that cinemas had. They were going to do it and we were going to stand in front like a movie and perform. So I see those kinds of attempts coming out like as we getting numbers back down. And but it definitely wouldn't be anywhere close to what it used to be. So
Alrighty, we could sit here and talk with Kwame whole evening, but just a couple things. One more thing in terms of your social justice kind of a presence, in terms of what you would have seen emerge after the elections. Everybody was just in their feelings. Everybody, it was raw, it was open, people were saying what they want, there was a whole lot of race basing and whatnot and whatnot. What are some of your observations about us as a people, and what do you think, where do you think we're going? What is the way forward, so to speak? I know that's one of those loaded the way forward. But just, you know, your perspective on it.
What I realized, like I said it on Twitter, like the election make me learn a lot about my country, things that I took for granted. I am a black guy and I grew up in Saparia. Most of my neighbors is East Indian.
Right.
So growing up, we moved there when I was 9, but it took me a while to realize that race mattered in people's lives now, because it didn't seem to matter where I grew up. It's only when I got to secondary school and I realized, wait, nah, and then people, my friends tell me, you notice only have people of this type in here and people of this type here, and I was like, really, I never noticed those things. And still, I still have that kind of naive way that I approach life because of my youth, right? But yeah, I'm kind of, it's disappointing, but it was real disappointing to see how it exploded for the elections. And the way forward, I hope it's conversation. I think conversation between the two groups. UE is going to have something soon. I think the end of this week they have and your boy Raymond.
Yes, we saw.
And
we were trying to make it make sense, and we can't. We can't.
But yeah, I think those, because what I noticed happen is that everybody talks in their own silos, their own echo chambers. Like us, it's easy for us to have a certain opinion and a certain comfort in talking to each other because we all on the quote-unquote same side. But we have to have those across the table conversations, where the harsh ones, when people say things that are incorrect, and because that's the only way I foresee us having some degree of integration. And getting over the myths that people believe about history. And so definitely more conversation, I think, is important and necessary, even though sometimes the conversation will include incorrect things. I think it's important to have anyway.
Agreed.
One of the things we have to keep in mind, because it's important, of course, to have conversations, but within those conversations, to continually reflect.
For sure.
To continually reflect and be willing to change your position when presented with information that counteracts what you previously held dear.
For sure. Here's a thing that I started thinking about because of Raymond Ramcharita. He said so there's definitely a group of East Indian people in Trinidad that believe they were excluded from the political scene.
Agreed. Yeah.
Because of the dominance of the PNM for the first 30 something years of our independence.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
I have written about this.
That and pop culture.
Right.
But to me, from my perspective, they have increased or they see that as evidence of their systematic oppression.
Except that's not how systematic oppression really works.
Yeah. But it's a conversation we have to have.
Yeah, right. Fair.
Yeah. And the thing is, I agree with that, and this is why previously when talking about indentureship, I referred to socio-political marginalization, because examining the media presentations at that time, there was a lot of reduction of Indian heritage people. There was a lot of exoticization and sensationalization and things that created in the general mind a very warped idea of an entire demographic and created the stereotype of the Indian person. So when people express these things, I understand their pain, I understand their anger, I understand their frustration, but do not use this as justification for your racism.
Right.
We are all struggling to get over information that was brought to us at different times in our lives that were incorrect things. We are all struggling to emerge from that. Do not allow the fact that you are at one time oppressed or that you are at one time marginalized to justify your current day racism. Because if that's what we're doing, then we ain't going anywhere.
That's right. It's this, and it's not even just, sometimes I think we need to make it very specific, because we use racism in a way that it almost, in a way, kind of makes it ambiguous, but it's clear anti-blackness.
Yeah.
Right.
Anti-blackness. This is what it is, and this is a phenomenon that it be not special, I tell people being black is a full-time work no matter where you go, anywhere in the world right about now. So we're not peculiar in this experience right about now. I think one of the things that is interesting is the fact that we predominantly exist in a space that deals with demographics of color, but again, it's still anti-blackness because there are various demographics of color in Trinidad and Tobago that have a certain proximity to privilege right now, proximity to wealth, and yes, there may have been socio-political frameworks and contexts in the past where they may have felt excluded and erased, but that is no longer the case. You understand what I mean? So again, for me, it's about reconciling what would have gone before and where we are right now. That's me. Anyway, Kwame, quick and dirty questions. Ramsaran's peanut punch, individual or company accountability? Go.
Jeez, neither. I don't know, I feel like it's more complex than that. Individual and
there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
See why I like him? How you coping? The dragging of Urvashi is Urvashi. What do you pronounce her name?
Urvashi Rupnarai.
Urvashi Tiwari Rupnarai.
Yes.
Get it right.
No way.
Urvashi.
Urvashi Tiwari Rupnarai.
Sissy Shaw.
Which paper is she from?
I think it's the Express.
Right.
Anyway, point is, you got a lot of prominence and viral exposure in your interactions with Urvashi over the last few weeks or so. How have you been coping with that?
I coping well. Not so sure about her, but I coping well. I said that people come to my page looking for extra bacchanal, as has been like the feature of my correct. It was accidental again. Like I just responded to the lady comment. I don't know why she find my post of all the million posts.
That was one thing I wondered as well, because you see what took place in the press conference. I mean, as hilarious as it was something that needed to happen.
Yeah.
Since COVID became a problem, we've had journalists just flying out at the panelists.
Questioning
Every time
credentials,
there's a conference, we have this
with
happening.
always an undertone,
This
a
is it.
specific
This is
undertone
it.
to it.
She seems to have some conspiracy theorist leaders.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I liked about the doctor's response to her is he wasn't petty, he
Yeah.
wasn't aggressive.
He stated facts.
He was just stating the facts. It's my deal.
And it was
I
sufficient.
just want you to know.
It was sufficient. But again, I also looked at her response after, because he wasn't the only one who dealt with her certainly on social media, but she was showing up on various posts and whatnot in defense of the indefensible, so to speak.
Which I thought was just so childish.
But my thing was, though, I was wondering, where can I access that kind of job security where I could jump out myself fully as a public figure, telling people about eating manure and whatnot, and be okay to go to my 9 to 5 the next day. Like, I don't understand how that works in TNT, but hey, last one. Oh, it's true. Last one. How many public figures have blocked you on social media? I've heard there are a few.
So far, I know of 2.
They are?
The infamous Gary Griffith and Colin Imbit. Yes.
Wow.
We love Gary Griffith around these parts. We love him. We love him.
Yeah. The Colin Imbit one is because it was carnival time last year, and I let my people chuck me into doing something silly. It was coming up to Bacchanal Road, and everybody, the vibes is trying to get tickets to Bacchanal Road, and so he posted something about Hitler, and it was weird. It was just out random post about Hitler. So I reposted it, asking what the hell is this, and he messaged me. He DM'd me on Twitter, and I just took the opportunity to ask him for Bacchanal Road tickets. Like the important stuff.
The important, exactly. I mean, when I was here,
since we're here,
can I get some Bacchanal Road tickets? And at that point, he blocks you.
Immediately. Immediately blocked me, and so now he's reposting important things on Twitter that
And
I
you
just
have no
completely
access
ignorant.
to.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Please come in, but if you're listening to this, unblock me, please. I'd like to know what's going on with the finance ministry.
We'd like to know how much culture and the arts get in the budget. You know,
And we want to know how to get Bacchanal Road tickets.
Yeah.
For me, it's been awesome having you. We had a good time. I mean, we know these girls is heavy down the dance sometimes, but we like. I mean, it's important conversation.
It's important.
Exactly.
We are heavy whiners.
Wow. As Amanda just gave us the most convent girl wine ever. I'm talking about heavy wine.
She out of practice.
It's been a while. It's true. So, Kwame, tell us a couple things before you go. Tell us where people can find you on social media, and tell us where people can access your very cool merchandise. He's wearing a very cool t-shirt right about now. Go.
Yeah, you can find me by my name, Kwame Weeks with a K, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok and all. Next to Gary Griffith.
Yep.
And my merch, you can find it on Instagram. I have it in my bio. I have a link that you could go and shop. So
Great. Thank you so much, Kwame. We're so glad we got to hang with you today.
Thank you, Kwame.
Yeah,
and we got
Nice.
it out, we system.
Indeed.
Stay with us. When we come back, we will quickly remember when, because you know we rarely talk with Kwame, but it was good. We needed it. So yeah.
Listen, it's out of my system now.
So you're good.
It's out of my system.
All right, and we're back. So we're going quick and dirty. Remember when? I know we were talking about the anniversary of the state of emergency. I think that's a great one
I'm
to
doing an
remember.
error before and said 2012, but it was actually 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, remember when the then government under Kamla Prasad Bisesa
Kamla
called
Prasad
what in
Bisesa.
essence was an illegal state of emergency?
Right. And so during the time of the state of emergency, and I think this is the real critical point that would be examined for ages hence was the suspension of the constitutional rights of citizens, giving the police authority to detain people without a warrant. So during this time, dozens of people were arrested, and to this day, there has been no apology, there's been no inquiry into what went on.
Nope.
There is now the infamous interview between the then Attorney General Anand Ramlogan and veteran journalist Dominic Kalipasad, in which Dominic posed very pointed questions about the reasons and about the legality of the state of emergency. And at that time, the Attorney General fumbled through most of his responses because their only justification was that there were 11 murders within the space of 48 hours. And this was used to justify not just the suspension of constitutional rights, but the targeting of 6 areas that we know remain to this day what we call hotspots. Just like in the States, remember Hillary Clinton had that wonderful super predator term at the time that came to define an entire demographic. So too in Trinidad and Tobago, hotspots came to define certain areas. And so what happened at the end of June in Caledonia, that is one of the part of the legacy
of
that time.
Okay, and as we talk about what would have happened at the end of June, we want to make special mention of the victims of what we have come to call the Mova triple murder. We make special mention again of Joel Jacobs, Israel Clinton, Noel Diamond, and the young woman who was murdered on the Beetham Odella Graves, the young pregnant woman who was murdered on the Beetham in the midst of protest action that came out of the triple Mova murder. People being incensed over what would have happened in Caledonia. You know, I think it's important to keep calling their names because it's very easy for us to forget. You know what I mean?
And of course, the name Odella Graves brings to our mouth, and we also say the name of Beverly Jones, who died during the 1970 uprising in Trinidad and Tobago under similar circumstances.
Interestingly enough, the PCA made a commitment a few days ago that their findings should be released within the next few days in terms of if there was police negligence involved in these 4 killings. It's going to be very interesting to see the response of our now police commissioner as it pertains to those findings. He has been particularly antagonistic to the Police Complaints Authority again over the last few days in terms of suggestions the Police Complaints Authority would have made in terms of disciplinary action against a high-ranking member of the police service in terms of inappropriate behavior and taking private jobs, which apparently goes against rules and regulations within the Police Service Commission. So it's going to be interesting. And again, we must take note of the fact that the person who is now our police commissioner also played a very pivotal role in the state of emergency.
Indeed.
Back in 2011. We have to connect the dots, TNT.
Indeed.
Connect the dots.
Indeed.
Right? Which makes it very interesting for us to take note of his approach since he has started his one shot, one kill mantra. And interestingly enough, since we have started highlighting certain statistics as it pertains to our present police commissioner's tenure, very strange statistics have been emerging out of the police service claiming that crime is down, claiming that there have been reductions in certain types of crime, etc. I suppose as justification for the approach that they have taken thus far. But I have not seen any external entity or body corroborate these statistics that are supposedly now coming out of the TTPS as it pertains to crime and violence in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly coming out of certain communities. So,
well, I love
grain of salt.
Statistics. One lesson I learned in my early days studying sociology was one of the best uses of official statistics is for you to study the people who collect them.
Hey you!
So let's wait. We will wait for these statistics
Yes.
and examine that.
Added to that, I also wanted to make special mention of the fact that things, like I said, things are not good right now in the United States, and I really don't understand what it is taking for international bodies to start to intervene. Where are the sanctions? Where are the travel advisories that are so easy to be issued for other territories that somehow the United States seems to be immune to? But as we stand right about now, it has been more than 100 days since Breonna Taylor was murdered in her own bed by U.S. law enforcement
officers,
and she has received no justice. As of yesterday, today is, as we are recording, is August 25th. As of yesterday, another young man was shot in his back 7 times in front of his children. And we also say his name again, which is Jacob Blake. So it was a multi-pronged remember when, but I think it was an important remember when. Sometimes remember when don't have to be quite oho way back when. Sometimes remember when could be yesterday as it pertains to the things that are happening today.
Yes, exactly. Historical contingency is important, and when you have a lady trying to become Prime Minister of a country for a second time, when she has things like these right in her back pocket, in terms of her own personal history and in terms of the history of our country, we have to remember when.
Hey. All right, TNT. Let's move now into Answer That. And it is a very simple question. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. COVID, something called COVID-19. In case you're... Coronavirus. Right? Just in case you missed
Coronavirus.
Yeah. We've had some astronomical figures as of today. I think this morning, today, August 25th, this morning's release was 85, which means by the time you add on what would have come out this evening, I suspect today, August 25th, might be our largest daily tally as of since this whole thing started, you know?
Which is what we were told to expect.
Yeah.
Wave.
COVID has proven that it is no respecter of persons. I mean, yes, there are certain contingencies in terms of accessibility to certain resources, particularly in the United States. You know, Black people are getting infected by COVID at disproportionately higher rates because they have less access to healthcare. But here in TNT in particular, where at least, you know, we have seemed to have managed things to a certain point where we have the parallel healthcare system operating alongside the existing healthcare system, etc., etc. Yeah?
Yes.
Tim Gopi Singh was diagnosed a few days ago.
Yes.
Dr. Rowley apparently could have been potentially exposed. He since tested negative, but he was advised to go into self-quarantine, which he did. He would have come out of self-quarantine this morning. All these kinds of things have been happening. Everybody is on edge. That's the backdrop. I've just painted the backdrop. In the midst of all of that,
Some exposition.
in the middle of that whole busy bacana, Vandana Mohit, the young lady, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I mean no disrespect to her name. But the young lady who was once the mayor of Chaguanas, for whom I came out in defense of, I think it was last year or year before, when there was potentially a pornographic video that was being circulated, and you all know how I feel about that in terms of it being a violation. So I will always be in defense and an advocate against those things. But Vandana, I want to ask you a question. As past mayor of Chaguanas and a now elected parliamentary representative, sis, how exactly is COVID equivalent to karma? That you would go on social media platforms and make a statement of that. What I'd like to tell you, Ms. Mohit, as a good friend of mine said a few days ago, you are no longer the representative of a particular demographic or a particular party. As an elected representative, you are now representative of all people. So what karma exactly, my sweet, are you talking about?
You know what's interesting about Vandana is in the lead up to election, there was a young man of some veracity in terms of his critical thinking who wrote a piece called Why Kamala Lost and Why She Will Continue Losing.
Oh yes, I saw it.
And he used the same Vandana as an illustration of new politics in Trinidad and how politics could reinvent itself. And he used both Vandana and the other person who went up in Shogun as East as well. So it was just funny to me to notice that hot off the heels of this good press,
You understand?
Vandana couldn't
She
just
fully
keep
fuck
it
it up.
together,
Nah,
you know?
she fully fuck it up.
Keep it together.
Fully fuck it up. And I make no apologies for saying that. Because how, like no time in typing that, I imagine she was probably on her phone. At no point before you hit post, you didn't think that this was inappropriate. You really thought you were being profound, my dear. That karma, that COVID is karma in reference to what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago post-elections. And because supposedly the PNM ran an election based on their treatment of COVID-19. I really wonder if at any time you thought how the now 15 families who have lost people to COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago must feel about you equating karma and COVID. What karma are they reaping right about now?
Let's listen to the definition of karma. The sum of a person's actions in this and previous states of existence, viewed as deciding their fate in future existences. This tells me that Vandana herself seems to have a poor understanding of what karma is.
But what we could tell, what Vandana, you know what? You know what I will tell you, my sweet? That based on that statement that you made, unless you make serious amends, and we're talking spirit thing here now, unless you make serious amends for that energy that you put out into the universe because of that statement you made, you better be mindful of your own karma, my dear.
Yeah.
Right? So, again, Vandana, we ask you, how exactly is COVID equivalent to karma? Answer that.
Answer that. Answer that. And you can do a Google search, a simple Google search on the effects of COVID, a simple Google search on...
Rishvashi.
I mean, you and Avashi could sit together and do Google searches about this.
All right, we'll be back in just a minute. We're getting ready to wrap it up. We're talking how we spending the money. And yeah, I want to bring back something we would have spoken about in the Lost Files, but let's just take a quick break and come right back. All right, guys, we're getting ready to wrap it up, but you know, before we go, we always had to talk about how we're spending the money, and it is very important in these Ram-Serenian peanut punchian times.
Spoiling like milk.
How are you spending your black dollars? Huh? Right, so in episode 3, The Lost Files, we made special mention of one of my loves of my life, Vaughnette Bigford. She is like a sister to me. I adore this woman for so many reasons. She's so brilliant. She's so talented. Her spirit is light. She's beautiful. And she's also very giving. And Vaughnette is also very understanding of what it means to mentor and guide young people here in TNT. She is from Brea. She knows what the arts did for her when she was a young person in Brea, and she wants to do the same for other young people in Brea right about now. So, Vaughnette is making a bid to open a school for the arts in Brea. And again, in light of the fact that we don't yet have our accounts together, so to speak, I know it's taking long, but you know, it is what it is. If you were ever moved to want to donate to us, what we would ask is that you instead donate to Vaughnette Bigford's effort to open her school for the arts in Brea. We're going to attach some articles to the link for the podcast, today's podcast, where you can check out an article that was done in the Newsday as it pertains to Vaughnette's efforts to open the School for the Arts in Brea, as well as a link to a GoFundMe campaign that she currently has running where you can donate to this effort as well. It is really important. We can't be out here talking about, you know, the youth is the future, and, you know, we have to take care of the children, and we not putting our money literally where our mouths are. Yeah, it takes money, it takes investment. We have now, you know, added on culture and the arts as an appendage to tourism, but we will talk about that another time.
Yes.
But I mean, it is really time for us to understand the power of the arts to shape and transform and rehabilitate, and the fact that it really can stand on its own, for simply the reason that it has the ability to affect and intersect with community development, with social welfare, with education, with literally so many of the other overarching titles, you know, with so many other spheres. It's so important. So when we get the opportunity to support efforts like these, that make a point of this school for the arts that's going to deal with not just the performance aspect, but heritage and culture and education and, you know, making a difference in young people's lives who may be in particular situations as it pertains to their home circumstances and whatnot. We cannot pass up that opportunity. So that says, dip your hand in your pockets, take out your credit card and donate. Thank you. All right, so Amanda, this was great. I had a good time hanging out with Kwame.
Kwame's a cool guy.
Yeah,
you know?
I love it. You know, we'll continue to ask him how he's coping on at various intervals. We'll check in with him, and yeah, we will do our darndest to make sure that we don't take so long to post another episode. We're sorry, but you know, things happen. All right. Have a great one. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, bye everyone.
That was Rock the Boat 868, the podcast.